Hello, everybody. Good morning to the webinar on BIM 360. And this is the second series of our presentation, basically. And in the last session, we saw that we did a live session on BIM 360, where we went to the portfolio live, and we got few participants who participated in the presence of the live sessions. And we did a lot of activities on BIM 360 in this case. So it's a continuation of the same webinar which we scheduled last week, basically. And before I start up my webinar, there's a small safe harbor statement which I want you to go through preferably. And whatever contents which I share in the presentation, it quite remains confidential. And please take a note of all the terms and conditions on this safe harbor statement in this case. So I believe you might have taken a note on the safe harbor statement. And what we'll do is let's see how our agenda of today's webinar would be. First of all, the first piece of the slides would be talking about the learnings of our first session of BIM 360, which is therein. And we'll do a small refresher on all the learnings which we had in our last session, basically. Similarly, we will also see some new features, preferably how we could do more tighter collaboration with different tools like Revit, Plan 3D, and Civil 3D. We'll also learn the things which we missed out last time on how do we conduct approval workflows and transmittals in this particular webinar session, basically. And at the end, you can post down your questions, and I'll reply back to those queries basically at the end of the session. So what we could do is let's move on to the very first piece of the learnings from our first part of the webinar session. And we did all these things live during our last session, basically. And we learned something about BIM 360, and to talk about BIM 360 as we understood as a cloud solution. We could do document management on the top of BIM 360. We also touched upon or talked about the design collaboration piece of BIM 360, which is there. But in the last session, what we did on the document management portal is we understood that we could add different stakeholders on the BIM 360 platform. You could give him the respective rights on the BIM 360 platform, whether he's a project admin, account admin, whether he wants view only rights, download rights, upload rights on the document which is there, basically. And how do you collaborate or share your documents, between the internal and the external stakeholders as a part of your project in this case, basically. And meanwhile, we also talked about how do you do a batch controlling on the permissions piece which needs to be provided on the top of BIM 360 platform, basically. So that was our first learning which we had from our last session. The next piece is we talked about whatever kind of documents it might be. It could be a plain DWG file, it could be a 3D model, it could be Excel documents, Word documents, or PowerPoints. All these pieces of information can directly come on our BIM 360 platform, which is there. So once we publish these documents on the cloud, preferably, you could share these documents with the respective stakeholders. We also learned one particular important aspect is the multi-sheet page PDFs which are there. So if in case if a PDF comprises of number of drawing sheets which are there, then how do we segregate those pieces of information via the OCR title block recognition facility which is there, basically. And how do we do the title block automation inside of BIM 360? And we also talked about how to upload a linked file documents and a non-linked file document. When I say linked and non-linked, linked is a plain DWG file, but when a document gets integrated with a lot of extracts, with a lot of supporting files inside Revit, it becomes a linked file in this case, basically. So how do we publish all those kind of documents on the cloud was our second learning from the last session which we concluded. The third piece which we learned in our last session was how do we perform markups on your documents basically. When I say markups, markups could be performed on the top of 3D models. Markups could be performed on the top of 2D drawings as well. So you do a select a facility where you create a small markup on your document, push comments to that document, and share these markups with the respective stakeholders on your project who are a part of your project. And the other piece which we also learned is like BIM 360 not only works on a desktop platform on an internet browser, but you could also utilize it on the top of your mobile phones via the BIM 360 apps which are there. So that was the third learning from our last session which is there. The fourth piece is the other piece of collaboration. Apart from marking up your drawings, we also have a facility to add issues on the top of our documents which are there. When I talk about issues, issues could be raised with a title head in this case. You could push a beautiful description to that, attach photographs to that particular issue markup which is there basically. And these issues could be placed or tracked on any piece of the project or any piece of the document which is therein. And we also saw that issue management not only needs to be done with respect to a document, it could be without a document in this case as well. And the beauty is, we talked about how to extract various kind of reports in our last session. We talked about exporting these information, sorting these issues, and creating a timeline report which automatically gets shared in our inbox every one day, depending upon the timelines which might have selected in the insight report. So that was the fourth important learning which we did in our last session basically. And the next important, that's the fifth piece of our learning from our last session, was how do we visualize document. So in case if you if you're a team leader who is viewing these kind of information, who is collaborating, coordinating, and communicating on this piece of information, whether it is a 2D drawing or whether it is a 3D model basically, all of these information could be directly seen on the top of a browser which is there. And the beauty is, for example, if you're referring to a piece of document linked to a particular piece of the model, you could actually play with that piece of the information. You could see the documents which are hyperlinked on your 2D drawings which are therein basically, and you could easily toggle between both 2D documents as well as the 3D models in this case basically. So that was what we saw in, and we also talked about that in case if you want to 3D view 3D models coming in not only from Autodesk application but also third-party applications which are there in BIM 360 gives you access to more than 150 file formats support on the cloud. That's a other piece which we learned on in our last session basically. The next important piece of the learning from our last session is we talked about embedded data. When it is a BIM model, it comprises of a lot of information which is there. And for example, the wall example which you're currently seeing on the screen, basically, seeing the finest properties of that particular element which is there in basically, seeing the thickness of that particular wall. We also saw a plant example last time where we talked about the size of that equipment, the size of that line segment which is there, etc. So as this is just a refresher, so that's a small video which talks about how do we see the embedded properties of the different elements on a project which is there basically. And the last piece which we learned as a part of the learning is like we could access BIM 360 information anytime, anywhere, and through any device which is there in basically. So wherever you start communicating, collaborating, it lies on the same system on the portal, and it is quite transparent in nature, and anybody can see whatever information which they need on the platform which is there basically. The other beauty which we talked about is like We also had the online viewing capabilities on BIM 360. So for example, if you're accessing this information on the construction site in this case, we have offline downloading capacity of the documents on the phone app. And whenever you are having a site review meeting, you could comment on that particular drawing or document, and whenever you come back to the space where there is internet connectivity, it could go back to the same BIM 360 model in this case basically. And whatever updates which you do in this case via markups, via issues, via any kind of comments in this case, it tracks those information live, and it tracks those information via the date and the timestamp on that particular piece of the document or the project which is there basically. So these were all the 7 learnings from our last live session which we did in basically. And the best part is the next piece is something called as version control, where we did a version control on our 3D model. We did a version control on the 2D documents, where we compared 2 sets of the document predominantly belonging to the version 1 and version 2. And preferably, while we're doing these version comparison, we saw how we could overlay a particular set of document, how we could overlay a particular set of the model and see these comparisons in different color codes on the top of our BIM 360 platform, which is there. So that's the end of whatever we discussed on the last learnings on the part 1 of our session basically. So today we'll first start up with something called as a BIM 360 design collaboration with our first tool, that is Plant 3D in this case basically. And before I start up with doing these collaboration live on the BIM 360 platform, what I wanted to speak about is like what Plant 3D is all about basically. So Plant 3D, as I talked about last time, is something a tool which could do in PNID drawings for you. It could do Plant 3D modeling for you basically. It could generate isometric drawings and orthographic drawings, etc. So I believe many of you might be using Plant 3D from the AC collection portfolio. You might be using it from One AutoCAD or the PDMC collection for that particular piece of pattern. So in case if you use Plant 3D, how do you collaborate on BIM 360? Now, one way is, which we talked about last time, is we upload the model by a manual method directly on BIM 360. But by the version 2021 of Autodesk Plant 3D, we have something called as live collaboration between BIM 360 design and Plant 3D in this case. So whether you're a piping designer, whether you are a plant modeler, which is there, whether you're a PNID designer, it doesn't matter. You could collaborate it directly on the cloud in this case. So what I meant by that is like, you did not store your specs, catalogs, models on your local machine. This could be stored directly on the cloud, which is there. So your cloud will act as a central repository, which is there. So when we do these collaborations today, we'll do these collaboration via the BIM 360 design, and we'll see how this could be opened in BIM 360 docs in this case, basically. And the other piece is like all these information which comes from the centralized repository of BIM 360 design. It could be integrated with any of the third-party applications like your SAP systems, your ERP systems, your Forge platforms which are there in basically. And you could use the open API to integrate it with any of the third-party applications which you require to perform on BIM 360 design in this case, basically. So that's the first piece. Now let's assume how this works basically. So in the older versions of AutoCAD Plant 3D, we definitely had this collaboration, but these collaborations were most likely with BIM 360 team, and BIM 360 team and BIM 360 design were totally different platforms. But by the 2021 version, this collaboration could be performed directly with BIM 360 design in this case, the same platform where we currently collaborate for Revit as well, basically. So the 2021 version allows the plant designer to directly share or collaborate the information on the cloud platform which is therein. And the beauty is these plant 3D users, they could share this PNID information directly with the Revit users in this case via the new module which is there basically. So before I go on with the visual video of this, let me show you how this works live on BIM 360 in this case basically. So I've got Autodesk AutoCAD 2021 on my system, which you're currently seeing on the screen. And in the 2021 version, you have noticed a new facility where you could see the collaborate button, which is there in basically. And last time when we took this particular piece of the model, which is there, we uploaded this information manually on the BIM 360 platform. What we'll do today is like we will collaborate it via the collaborate button on BIM 360. So you've got your collaborate button, and what you could do is like you could say that I want to share this project on the cloud. Now, when you click on the functionality of share your project on the cloud, you could just press something called as get started, and it will say that one of your drawing is open on the cloud. So do you want to close them now? So you could preferably push on the close button. While what it does meanwhile is like it fetches your hub on the cloud basically. Last time what we did in is like when I talked about fetching your hub, what does BIM 360 hub? Every organization has got a unique space on the cloud basically. So in case if your email ID is already associated with the BIM 360 hub in this case, it will show the respective hubs which you could collaborate on basically. So currently I could collaborate on my particular space on the cloud which is there. So I've got my unique hub and I could show it on BIM 360. That's something called as Preeti underscore Autodesk which is there. And under this Preeti underscore Autodesk, you could select on the project which you want to collaborate. So what I will doing is like last time I already started up with something called as a plant project. I could open up that plant project which is there. And while it is opening up, I could also say that I want to upload the project on this particular space. So you need not do these things manually, but just by a drag and drop method, but you could directly upload this piece of information on BIM 360 via the collaboration to Plant 3D basically. Let's see while it takes a few seconds to push this information on the cloud. And meanwhile, while it is collaborating, I can show you the project of BIM 360 design in this case. Where does it come in? So for example, once I do the live collaboration on BIM 360, I can show you the document management portal where this particular piece of information gets collaborated on the cloud in this case. Yeah. So while it is pushing all the information, you could see that it shows you a lot of files. So what it collaborates is it collaborates your project data, that is your drawing files which are there in your isometrics, your orthographics, your 3D model, your spec sheets, your project databases. Everything moves onto the cloud and it gets collaborated on the cloud basically. Now we are waiting for the server to complete our project creation which is there, and meanwhile while it is doing these collaboration, you could see that there is a sample project information which is directly come on the BIM 360 portfolio. I believe you are able to see in this information, and what you could see is like while I collaborated this particular piece of information directly from Plant 3D, whatever isometric data which were there, and basically that has come to the portal, and you could see the timestamp which is there, and so it shows that when it has last collaborated this piece of information and what is the time and the date stamp which is there. Similarly, it also shows you the respective spec sheets which are there. your PSPC, PSPX files which are there on the portal also directly collaborated on the cloud which is there basically. Meanwhile, now your project is cloud powered. If you want to invite additional team members on the project, let me open it in Google Chrome. And so you could invite any additional team members who want to collaborate on this particular piece of the project which is there. So now you could invite respective team members on that particular project which is there. How do you invite those team members? You have a facility to call up the respective team members on that particular project which is there in basically. So I just wanted to ask the audience if anybody wants to do a live collaboration right now and wants to explore this particular feature on the cloud, please post your email IDs in the chat window, and I can call those people directly on the portal right now and talk about collaboration features, and they could do it live basically. Anybody who wants to volunteer, please post your email IDs on the chat window, and I'll get you added to this particular project which is there, and we could do this particular piece live. Yeah, please post your email IDs, and I'll get you added basically in this project. Hey, thanks Navin Kumar for adding your information. What I will do is I had added Navin Kumar last time also in my project, and let me invite him to this particular piece of the live collaboration which is there. And let me give him the complete updates. So Naveen, what you could do is I showed you how to collaborate one piece of the sample of your project. Either you could work on the same project, or either you could collaborate your own piece of project on Plan 3D which is there basically. So how do you do that? The one piece is I invited you. I could close this, and as I said about the last time that we could collaborate the piece of information which is there in basically. So now you could see that the sample BIM 360 project which I have collaborated, you see something like two categories. One is the project which is open on your local machine. One is the sample project which comes via BIM 360 which is there in basically. So as I'm the project admin, I am currently checking out my file, and I'm opening that particular piece of information directly from BIM 360 in this case basically. So I'm no more opening that file from my local machine in this case. Now when I do a small check-in and push pieces of information which is therein, or I delete certain tags etc., these particular changes which we do in the particular piece of the model, it gets updated on the cloud in this case basically. Okay, so you've got a facility of check in and check out which is there on the top corners of the collaboration button. And while you collaborate on the cloud, as I talked about, it comes on the BIM 360 platform in the sample file categories which are there. So currently I'm referring to the PNID drawings directly on my local machine from BIM 360, which is over here. So I'm referring to the same file both on the cloud and both on Plan 3D in this case basically. So in case if I don't want to work this feature, so what I could do is I also have a facility of check in and check out basically. So currently it is checked out. If I want to check it, I could say that you could keep your cursor on the current drawing which is open and say that keep files open for editing after check-in basically. So now I'm checking in that particular drawing in this case, and it no more acts as a read-only file, but it acts as a file which could be used for editing purposes in this case basically. So in case if I'm no more working on the drawing, for example, Navin Kumar, who's working on this project, wants to work on the same drawing, he needs to request me to check out that particular file so that he can open up that particular piece of document on his machine which is there. So now the document is available for check-in, and I have got all the flexibility to edit the documents over here in case if I want to do, edit the any piece of, for example, let me say that I don't want this particular piece of the wall which is there in basically. So I did some changes on my document which is there. So once that is done, I could go and update these particular features which are there in basically, and reshare and re-update this particular piece of information which is there basically. So whatever I have updated, these piece of information will directly get updated on the cloud basically. And we also have other options which are there on Plant 3D. For example, whenever you're doing some changes on your documents, how frequently could those changes should get updated on the cloud. So for example, it could happen manually every time. So if you make it um, uh, you trigger these options manually, uh, every time you need to go and do those options, check out those options basically. Or you could push it every 5 minutes, saying that whenever there is any kind of updation on my document, it automatically gets updated on the cloud in this case basically. We also have other options, like for example, I opened that document directly from BIM 360. So when a document is directly opened, it should check out that particular piece of the drawing basically, and whoever is trying to edit that particular document will not be able to do those changes on this particular piece of the documentation which is there basically. And whenever that particular document is closed, it should check in, it should allow any users to check in that document which is there basically. So these are few options which are available for the respective stakeholders or team members who are working on my project to see the changes which happens in my documents basically. Yeah. And the shared views and DWG compare are certain new set of features which have come in AutoCAD basically. So I'm not going to talk about all those things. So I could check in the updates which I have done, and I could resynchronize it back to my, the BIM 360 model, which is there on the cloud basically. While I'm checking these pieces of information which is there in basically, in case if there are subsequent changes on the documents which are there in basically. So for example, I was doing some changes on my PNID drawings, etc., which is there in. Whatever changes which I perform on my document while checking it, you see that it has tracked in the different versions of that document basically. So currently it has made that same PNID drawing sheet version 3 basically. So you could see it via the history while I do those changes on my Plant 3D model in this case basically. So that was my version 3, and this is my, for example, I've changed the tag to 1005, and you could see that the old version of the drawing is also laying on that particular document which is there basically. So at this point of time, I can do something called as comparison, and instead of manually doing that, I could do via the automatic method on the cloud and check out two versions of my documents which are there in basically. You see this? It shows both red and blue color on the same PNID document basically. But now we have not manually uploaded this information, but we have collaborated through Plant 3D on the cloud in this case basically. In case if you want a more splitter kind of method, so you could even use a splitter. So for example, on the left hand side, you could see version 3 of my document. On the right hand side, you see version 1 basically. So whenever you check in and check out and do the respective changes, or your team member does the respective changes and synchronizes it on the cloud automatically tracks the different versions of that particular piece of the document basically. Now these version updates only happen when you're doing check-in and check out on that document basically. And during that particular piece of the time where I showed you a lot of options, so in case if you trigger it manually, every time you do an update on the Plant 3D model or the Plant 3D drawing, it automatically synchronizes that piece of information which is there. In case if you do it manually, every time an update occurs, the software will ask you whether it has to synchronize those changes on the cloud base. So this was, I was talking about integration with Plant 3D by using the collaborate button on Plant 3D and how do you open up the project. And the other piece is see to it that every time when you open up a project, open it from BIM 360 and instead of opening it from your local machine in this case basically. So that's the new tool of 2021 version. If you're using 2020, this integration is only with BIM 360 team and not with BIM 360 design in this case basically. Yeah, so that was how do you collaborate via Plant 3D on BIM 360 design in this case. Let us go back to our presentation, and whatever I talked about, I can show you a small snapshot via the summary of whatever BIM 360 collaboration with Plant 3D needs to be performed in this case. And the other piece is, as I talked about, I did not talk about how to create a new project because we already talked about this facility last time on our first session, basically. So once you create a new project, add the respective team members, we went to Plant 3D, we collaborated it from the cloud, we checked in that particular document, edited that document which is there in basically. And while we do any subsequent changes, whether it is on the PNID document or whether it is on the 3D model, all these subsequent changed information directly moves on to the cloud in this case, basically. Yeah, so these changes which you create on the BIM 360 model, whether it is the spec changes, whether it is the isometric changes, orthographic drawing changes, every subsequent piece of information moves on to the cloud which is there basically. And we also saw that while we are doing these changes, the cloud also tracks the versions of the documents on BIM 360, which is there basically. So that was our first collaboration on Plant 3D. And let's talk about, the security piece of it. I already addressed that we could give multiple permissions on the top of our documents on BIM 360. You could access the restrict or control that particular user's access on the portfolio in this case basically. And we also talked about how to perform issues markups last time on any piece of the models on the cloud. So the same features could be used on the Plant 3D, but instead of pushing those documents directly manually uploading it on the cloud, you could do it via the automatic features which are there in the system in this case. And the other thing is we could also streamline approval workflows. So I'll also talk about approval workflows live in the system later on when I'm doing few more details on the presentation. The best part is you need not have a local server to save your project data from coming from Plant 3D. All these information can currently be stored on the cloud platform which is therein, and you could subsequently collaborate with various disciplines, whether your teammates are using Revit or Plant 3D or Civil 3D, it doesn't matter in this case basically. So that is how you could simplify the administration. The next piece is I'll talk about something called as integration of BIM 360 design with Civil 3D in this case basically. And while I talk about integration with Civil 3D, similarly, as we collaborated, the Plant 3D models, Civil 3D also has got a tab for collaboration on the cloud base. Now, how does that happen in this case? Basically, same way on the project, you could, collaborate on the cloud. You could identify the respective stakeholders and invite that particular team members on the project. Let's assume that you start off with a small surface which comes from your survey data. Once you collaborate that survey data and collaborate it on the cloud, the check-in, check-out facilities allows the roadway designers to create create a grading out of that particular survey data, create alignments which are there, and or create respective models which are required to be generated from that civil 3D information which is there. And this could be then published on the cloud piece which are there basically. And based on that information, what you could do in is like the respective stakeholders can create the respective alignment drawings which are to be generated on the cloud which is therein. It could be cross-sectional details which are there. It could be cut and fill data bill of materials which are there in basically. So all these documents can move on the cloud from civil 3D. And definitely I talk about transmittals and the approval processes in the subsequent BIM 360 live session basically. Now, how does it work? As I said, civil 3D model could be collaborated directly via the collaborate button, as I showed you the plant 3D example. And every piece of information can come on BIM 360. On BIM 360, you could perform things like the visual version control piece, which is therein. You could do markups on the same civil 3D information. You could revive the submittals which are required to be done. Now, there are different ways of collaborating on the cloud. The other piece is why the desktop connector, basically. So in case if you have not utilized a desktop connector, one way is you manually upload. The other way you collaborate through civil 3D or plant 3D or Revit via the collaborate functionality. Or what you could also do in is like you could use that desktop connector on your system, and the desktop connector will synchronize the information on BIM 360 which is there. And while you're synchronizing, for example, a particular team member has checked in a particular document from civil 3D, it has a facility of locking and unlocking those files basically. So once you check in, that document becomes locked on BIM 360 basically. And the respective stakeholder who is working on that particular drawing basically, he only has got the right permissions to work on that document and edit that particular document in the form of 2D drawing or 3D model, which is there in this. So let's see how this gets collaborated on civil 3D in this case, basically. Now, while we perform these collaboration, what we could do is like, you could use the collaborate functionality, do the respective models which needs to be, connected via the desktop connector, select the piece of information which you want to collaborate. For example, the contour information needs to move on the cloud in this case, basically. You could call up, as I called up earlier in my project in Plant 3D, call up the respective stakeholder, give them the respective permissions, like, project member or a project admin in this case, basically. And while you're doing this, it also has a unique feature which talks about, automated file locking facility, which is there. So you could do the control file access and modifications, which is there. And so you could really understand which team member is actually working on that particular document, which is there in basically. And whether it is locked or unlocked, and who has got the right to modify, which is there in basically. And all the respective stakeholders who are authoring that particular set of document which is there in basically, they could visualize this particular piece of information which is there in basically. And here you're opening that document directly from civil 3D in this case. You're checking in that document and doing the respective real-time file accessing or editing in that particular piece of document. So now, as soon as you do the respective changes on your document, or you've created the respective changes on your document, or you've done an external file reference on that document, you see the version upgradation which directly happens on BIM 360 in this case. Now, as I did a small comparison on my Plant 3D model as well as 2D PNID drawings, the same comparison could also be done on the top of your civil 3D documents as well in basically. And definitely we all know the feature of creating issues, creating markups for communication. All those processes which we learned last time could be done in. And while we are doing this, we also have a facility of approval processes on our system basically. And the beauty of BIM 360, as we talked about last time, is, you know, the issue number which gets tagged to a particular issue which we create on BIM 360 basically. And the other piece is audit history. For example, at any point of time, you want to learn that what were the communications which were done on that particular piece of document. You could track those comments, you could expedite responses which are there in basically. And whatever you see currently is definitely a feature of Civil 3D along with BIM 360, which could be integrated on the cloud basically. The next collaboration which we are talking about is collaboration with Revit in this case basically. And how do you do this collaboration with Revit? Now, as we have the facility of integrating with Plant 3D, Civil 3D via the collaborate button, the same collaboration functionality is also there on the top of Revit in this case, basically. So you could utilize both the design collaboration functionalities, but in case of Revit data, what you could do in is like you could do much more activities which are there basically. So what I could do in is like I could go to this particular piece live instead of showing those snapshots which are there. For example, let's assume that I was talking about doing this collaboration live with BIM 360 and Revit in this case. Before doing that particular piece of activity, just go to the tab of your project admin. For example, you want to do these live collaboration on Revit. So in project admin, you have an additional task apart from inviting members is like, defining on what piece of the project or which team member will collaborate on the project. So what you do it is like you come down on BIM 360, come down on something called as services, and you go to the option called as design collaboration, which is there. And what you could do in is like in the services section, what you could do is like you could call different team members. The team members could be architectural, structural, MEP. It could be even individual stakeholders. For example, what I could do in is like I could say architectural team member and get them added basically. Now, while we are adding this, I would need to show you something which is there in over here. Is like as soon as I create this particular, uh, R structured MEP over here, yeah, I could add a next team member over here. So structures has been added, and then you've got the MEP stakeholders. So similarly, it could be group names, it could be company names, it could be individual team members which are there. So you add those respective team members in Revit, define on the color codes. And the beauty here is, let me refresh this particular piece basically. In the folders section in project files, what you could see in is like all the respective folders, like we created Arch, structures, and MEP. All these three stakeholders are there in this particular piece. Now, if I open up only architecture, you could see something called as consumed. Now, as soon as I share the information, you will also see a piece of information called as shared basically. Similarly, if you go to the design collaboration tab, you also see something called as the timelines which are there in this. You see this? There are three different stakeholders which we created over here. Yeah, so everyone is in a different color basically. Now the other piece is, let me go back to my document management and let me go to the respective folders. You also need to take care, is like I forgot to mention, is like in the teams, who are the different team members which are forming a part of your project which is there. So that needs to be called in. For example, let's assume as Naveen has volunteered, let's assume Naveen belongs to the structural team basically. So I will call up Naveen and add him and give him rights to this particular piece of the structural folder basically. So now Naveen is a member of the structural team member basically. So there are different permissions at different levels. So if he is doing design collaboration, the permissions in for the design collaboration needs to be decided over here in basically. So you could give him the view, edit, share, and control rights over here. Now once that is there in basically, what Naveen could do in is like Naveen could collaborate the piece of information. How does it do it from Revit? So I'll come back to Revit. And in Revit, what you could do is like just go to the button called as collaborate. So I go to collaborate, and in collaborate, currently your parent model might be lying on your local machine. Now, instead of doing that or on your server, so we'll collaborate on the cloud. So I could say collaborate my piece of model onto the cloud. Here I could select which hub I'm accessing. So I'm accessing the Preeti underscore Autodesk hub, and I could select the plant project, and let me go to the project file. And as I'm an architectural team member, I could say that I want to initiate my cloud collaboration over here in this particular. So now what it has done is like it has started work sharing. It is creating default work sets and uploading this piece of the information to the cloud in this case. Let's wait a while it collaborates these piece of the information. Now, as soon as I collaborate from Revit, the model starts appearing in the architectural section over here, as well as you will see it in the document management section. So in the document management section, you could see that my Revit models, which have started collaborating, have started appearing over here in basically. Yeah. And now it has collaborated this piece of information. So now let me close this. And how do you open this project? Now, once the project has been collaborated on the cloud, make it a point that you go to, while you're opening that file, go to BIM 360 and open up that. Or in the initial page, there are models which you could see, which is collaborated on the cloud. So I'll go to file, open once again. So that's one way of doing it. And let me close up Revit basically. And let me open up Revit. Now, while you're collaborating these piece of information which is therein, let me reload the design collaboration. Okay, so now as I've started collaborating from my Revit, you could see that the latest published model has appeared over here in this case basically. Now, similarly, in a project, it is not only architectural stakeholder who comes in, and you could see this particular, the collaborated model via a timeline button, or we call it a swim lane on the arc side of that particular project, which is there in basically. Now, subsequently, there could be different versions of the documents which gets updated on the cloud. So you'll also be able to see version 1 or 2 of that particular document. Now, in Revit, while you're opening up, one is you go to the BIM 360 hub and open up that file, and all the projects which are linked or cloud collaborated on Revit will be seen over here in this case, basically. And also make it a point, the first thumb rule is like, use the same email ID which you're using for accessing Revit as well as accessing BIM 360. If the two email IDs are different, you will face a difficulty in collaborating on the cloud. Now, in order to understand what information has been collaborated on the cloud, in the recent versions, you see all the models of Revit. Now, there are differences between two versions of the models of Revit. So whatever model is cloud shared, you see a small cloud icon against it. So it makes you help identify that whether this particular model is a local server model or it is a cloud shared model. So in case if you're doing it from BIM 360, you could do it from here, or you could either go to left hand side, go to Plant 3D, open that Revit file which is there. Now, here I could directly go and open up that model from BIM 360 in this case. So now when I open it from here, the model gets opened from the cloud and not Revit basically. Yeah. So this was an old version of the model. So it is also performing a upgrade at the background basically, and it will try to open up the model. Now, this was one example. I could show you a timeline which is more detailed out. For example, now, as I cannot upload on the behalf of structures and MEP, let's assume there are different stakeholders who are working on the project. So every stakeholder could come and collaborate his piece of the information on the cloud. And as soon as he collaborates his piece of information on the cloud, you could see that he has pushed his information on the cloud. And in the same design collaboration tab, what you could do is like you could see that particular piece of the model. For example, I could see the structural piece of the information which I've collaborated. Also, what you could do is like you could see the respective faces which are forming a part of your project. You've got the content browser which is therein. And for example, let's assume that it's a combined model. Let me go to something like this. And when you explore these pieces of the model, what you could also see in is like, for example, apart from the structural team, even if the architectural team has collaborated his piece of information. So this was my model. That is, I got my structural model. Now, if the coordinate system is common and the architectural team is also working on the same model, they could collaborate on the same piece on the cloud. And earlier I showed you timelines. So as soon as he collaborates his piece of information, you could see when he has collaborated, and when you open that particular link, you've got something called as the explore button. And what you could do is like with the explore button, you could see various team stakeholders who are working on your project. And you could see the overlay of both two models which are there. One coming from the structural team, one coming from the architectural team which is there. So these I symbol allows you to sort out or filter out in case if you want to see a single piece of information which is there basically. Yeah. And while we are doing all these things, it also has got something called as the change visualization piece. For example, currently there's no changes between the version 1 and the version 18 of that model which is there. So it will not show you anything basically. And what you could do is like you could exit these changes. Now there might be a question. For example, the same Revit model, while it gets opened up and while you are doing any editing, what the BIM 360 does is it only uploads the incremental changes. For example, let me come to this piece of the version. For example, I've clicked on this one. Here you could see there is one model and one set of document which is there. But subsequently in other documents, you will see that what piece of information are the incremental pieces of information which has been uploaded basically. So sometimes it could be of 5 drawing sheets which has been uploaded. So only the incremental piece of information gets transferred or updated on the cloud basically, not the whole piece of information. So in case if there's something which has been added, modified, deleted, removed, etc. So those changes get synchronized with the cloud, or those new updates in the form of drawing sheets model gets replicated on the cloud basically. And all these information could be seen on the swim lane view throughout the timelines which are there in basically. So I'll summarize upon what I talked about on Revit. First of all, while you're doing this collaboration, please make a note that the email ID which you use for registering on Revit and the email ID which you use for registering on BIM 360 should be the same basically. Yeah. And in case if it is the same, it will help you in effective collaboration. Now, while you're doing these collaboration, please make a note that you first create team members in your project admin. So go to your project admin, go to design collaboration, and the respective team members on the project which is there. So you go to services, say design collaboration, and first of all, are the team members? Create teams. It could be in the form of respective contractors or stakeholders who are therein. Create those teams which are therein basically. And invite the respective team members who will be collaborating their piece of information on the cloud which is there. Now, once you've added the different team members, created different teams which are therein, the subsequent document management system has got all the three folders which are ready, for example. So you've got your architectural, structural, and MEP piece which is there. So you see your MEP folder, structural folder, which is there in basically. Now, as soon as you collaborate from Revit any piece of information, now this is the model which I collaborated. How do you collaborate? So you go to the button called as collaborate, and currently I've already collaborated, so it doesn't show that option. But you press on the collaborate button and say that you want to collaborate on BIM 360, which is there in basically. Now, as it is collaborated on the cloud, it automatically appears over here in the architectural folder, which is there in basically. And meanwhile, while it comes over here, it also appears on the swim lane view of that particular timeline collaboration, which is there basically. For example, if you're the architectural team member and the structural team member collaborate, see to it that the project coordinates are the same. In case if the project coordinates are the same, then both the architectural and the structural models or MEP information will start coming on the same location basically. The next piece is while you're collaborating, every time you collaborate or synchronize your data, the cloud only takes in the incremental data to the cloud basically. So while you collaborate from Revit, just push synchronize. It takes only the incremental changes which happens on your model in this case. And all these contents which we see, like for example, I was a part of the structural team members basically. So in case if the models are on the same coordinates, the models will start lying on the top of each other in BIM 360 in this case basically. So I could see the different stakeholders, that is the team members who are a part of my project. So I could see the architectural information as well as the structural information which is coming from Revit in this case basically. I'll go back to my presentation now, and what I could do is like, so what happens is like, I talked about this point, as soon as I create, collaborate on the cloud, it creates a Revit model on the folder which I have created, and it creates, the Revit information which is over here in basically. Now the different stakeholders can come to that particular folder, and if they've got the right permissions, they can access that piece of information from Revit in this case, basically. The other pieces, we also talked about different packages, for example, different stakeholders working in. You also have the visual version control facility, which is there on the cloud. And all the project share data will come on a single file location. So either you do manual upload, either you do design collaboration, but if you're using Revit, Plant 3D, Civil 3D, etc., try to do design collaboration directly from the native authoring application instead of manually uploading on the cloud. And all these shared project information comes on a synchronized platform. And every time there is a change on your project or your data, it gets iterated, it gets revised, and the synchronized information moves on to the cloud in this case, basically. And for example, in my example, I talked about architectural, structural MEP. Now it could be different stakeholders, like different consultants working on your project. So you could also name that particular team's names in the form of the consultant's name, and they could push on the respective information on the cloud. Now, while this information is getting revised on a weekly manner, you could also see the visualization changes which happens by the comparison method which is there in basically. So what's been added, what's been removed, what's been modified. So no more you need to see document management, but for Revit, you could also use the tab called as design collaboration basically. And let me summarize upon whatever I talked about. So I said you'll use the project admin facility, create the different team members, assign team colors to it basically. Once you've assigned team colors, you could come down to Revit, and what you could do is like you could start your collaboration directly from Revit in this case basically, and all the stakeholders who we have mentioned could be able to synchronize their piece of information on the cloud basically. So let's use document BIM 360 not only as a document management tool, but also as a design collaboration facility, which is there in basically. And last but not the least, we also talked about desktop connector. In case if you use desktop connector, I could show you a small example. The desktop connector could be seen in a small, you know, icon via the tray. And every time if you currently I'm signed out, you could even work in the offline functionality which is there. You could see the pending actions which are available. For example, certain piece of information is not synchronized. Those information could be directly seen in the desktop connector which is there. So do install desktop connector as well in case if you want to synchronize the piece of information on the cloud base. And that's what we talked about BIM 360 integration with Civil 3D, Plant 3D, and Revit basically. Now let me talk about approval system basically and transmittals, for example. Now whatever documents, like I uploaded Revit files, I even uploaded the sample project plan collaboration files basically. All these could be sent as a transmittal. So I want to send the respective isometrics which form a part of my portal into the cloud basically. So I've got some isometrics files over here. Let me go to the production ISOs and let me see what are the respective drawings. So I want to send these two drawings as a transmittal. So select those documents and say that you want to create a transmittal. So you've got a facility to create transmittals over here and say that these are nothing but my plant transmittals. Enter the recipients, call the respective stakeholders. So, for example, Naveen Kumar is the person who is going to see this particular document, or any other stakeholders, basically. Give them the rights which are there in top, type down a message which you usually type down in Outlooks, basically. Please review the documents, and you create it. So now a transmittal is created, and while we create all the respective transmittals, it could be seen in the portal over here in basically. And when somebody receives that transmittal, you could see it over here basically. The other thing is like whether you collaborate from Plant 3D or Revit, what you could also do is like you could do something called as approval systems, or digital approvals could be performed over here. So what I could do is like, let me send all the details from the entire plant project for approval. And what I could do is like I've selected all the documents, and then I could say that submit for review. Last time I talked about how to create an approval workflow. Select the respective approval workflow which you want to utilize, and you could add a notes to it. Yeah. And now, for example, you want to select certain documents. What you could do is like I could go to the plant collaborate, the sample project, add my isometrics. For example, let me see something coming from here, and send it for approval from the system basically. Yeah. So submit for review, attach the documents, attached everything, and send it for submission. Now the different stakeholders who are a part of my approval system, they will be able to see this approval workflow. And we did this live during our last session. So whenever you perform any kind of review on your portal, you could see those approval workflows directly over here in this. Yeah. So who has opened up the document, who are the respective stakeholders basically, uh, and who has approved that set of documents. could be seen over here. And we also talked about how we could comment on that document and approve that document which is there. And meanwhile, while we are doing this, we could also export a small report as to what documents have been uploaded, and you could see it as a review report in this case, basically. Meanwhile, we also have got something like a dashboard facility, which is a insight report. Yeah, so whatever you know uh, issues which you created, how many issues are coming with this, which contractor, which particular organization, that could be seen basically. And if you want to customize it, you have got a varied set of card library available over here, and you could go to design and select which cards which you want as a part of your project. Yeah, so I'm just adding all the respective cards as a part of my project basically. You see this? So that is how I could customize my dashboard and the look of my dashboard basically in this case. How many documents are available for review, how many issues which are open up, out of which how many are issues related to code compliance, documentation incomplete, overdue issues, that could be all seen on my dashboard in this case basically. Let me go on to BIM 360, and that's the last piece. So you could perform a lot of prediction and analytics. So you've got a persona page, yeah, where we saw that we could see all the reports. You could customize your reports. That is what I talked about live in this case. In case if you want to add videos, photographs, we have got integration with lot of third party application. It could be a SmartWay, TrueView, Sensera, HoloBuilder, a Power BI, etc. So those third party integrations can also be performed on BIM 360, which is there. The next piece is creation of reports could be also done directly from BIM 360, and these reports could be scheduled basically. Uh, to summarize upon the last piece of BIM 360, why should you use BIM 360 with Revit, Civil 3D, Plant 3D, or as a sole document management tool? First of all, the transparency of the information, the controlled file information, whether it is Civil 3D, Plant 3D information which is there, you could do more efficient collaboration, no need of spending on the server, IT cost, etc. You could have a very seamless coordination which you require to be done in case if there is any kind of rework which is there, you could do it from your system and synchronize it on the cloud. Every team member can have a track of those change management which is happening in the version history which is happening in basically, and then do a design review with respective stakeholders which are there in basically via the approval workflow systems which are there. And the last piece is you could access your project data anytime and anywhere in this case basically. So uh, you could start collaborating on BIM 360 design today. So just apply for a live trial on BIM 360 design, which incorporates the document management functionality which I talked about last time, and the design collaboration features which I talked about today basically. So uh, here are a few email IDs. For example, if you've got any questions, please post your questions on the portal in the chat window. I will reply back to that questions right now. And meanwhile, we are talking on the respective queries which are there, and while you post your queries, I could launch even a small poll which will appear on your screen in this case, basically. Please reply to the poll which is appearing on your screen. Yeah. Thanks for voting in this case, and I could close this particular poll. Please reply to the next question, which is coming on your screen. Okay, so let me answer the subsequent question while you're replying to the poll on the screen, which is there in basically. What will happen when one of the file which is available in different drive and we are using the same file in the running project with xref, is this file will collaborate with BIM 360 basically. So let's assume that there are two documents, two models which are referring to the same xref file, and in case if one of the document has been opened up preferably, you will not be able to work on that particular document, especially with plant 3D in this case basically. The reason being, it will say that that particular document has already been checked in this case, the Taran. So you will not be able to collaborate on the cloud. And when I say I believe when you say different drive, you're saying that these are located on different file folders on BIM 360 basically. So the tool will throw a alert saying that that particular document has already been checked in into the system basically. Uh, I don't know what Shubham wanted to ask because he's just posted his question half. So Shubham, can you post your question into detail? Okay. So I believe people have voted for the second question. Let me talk about the next poll question which you want to have to reply in this case, basically. Meanwhile, any queries, please post your questions on the chat window. Please ask if you've got any questions on in the chat window. Please post your queries. Team, if you've got any questions, request you to post your questions on the questions window, basically. Thanks for responding. And in case if you've got any queries on how do you collaborate with BIM 360 for Revit, Plant 3D or Civil 3D, please do write down to us. These are our email IDs, me and my colleague. You can reach to either of us, and you could post your queries to us in this case, basically. Thanks for attending this webinar.